10 examples of toxic femininity. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and people have requested that I make an entire video about my perception of toxic femininity. But before I do that, I want to clarify yet again my general feelings about both toxic masculinity and toxic femininity, which is that I do believe they each manifest themselves during different individual situations and in certain cultural climates. For example, when feminism is popular, I believe toxic femininity becomes popular with it. Still, growing up in the 90s as a gay kid in a rough neighborhood, I had more run-ins with toxic masculinity than I can count, often in the form of boys wanting to prove they were tough by picking fights with easy targets, which was sometimes me because although I was rather big and had a sharp tongue, I was also faggy. But it didn't always work out so well for them. Regardless, as a result of being picked on for being gay, one of the first forms of toxic femininity presented itself, which was this thing that third wave feminists I knew would do at the time, which I refer to dramatically now as helping people out so that they become your slave. Of course, at the time, they would try to convince me that we had common enemies, basically with straight males. And it worked. Obviously, the idea of me becoming their slave is exaggerated, but I have literally known a woman who was apt to do this to people who referred to it in those terms. What happens is that a woman or girl acts super nice to somebody who is lonely or maybe being picked on by others, but they aren't doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. No, they are doing this because they have a use for you. And the second you stop being useful, they'll throw you out, like the New York Times. A lot of third wave feminists pretended to be my friend when I was in high school, but a lot of them simply wanted me to join their activist group or something so that they had more people. If anybody has seen the absolutely wonderful movie Princess Mononoke, the antagonist of the story pretty accurately represents a powerful and dangerous feminist. Lady Hibichi rose to power by finding brothel women and putting them to work, as well as saving lepers that nobody would touch. But these people all became her army. The second form of toxic femininity that I'm sure people have already guessed is simple lying. Why do women lie? Because people lie. Why might women potentially lie more often than men? Because they can get away with it better. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Women instinctually look out for the safety of other women. And men instinctually look out for the safety of women too. Funny how that works out for men. That said, if a woman ever has a problem with a guy, all she has to do is lie about him and she can drastically mess with him or even ruin his life. And he'll be practically defenseless. And women are all at least subconsciously aware that they have this power. But the ones who abuse this power, who happen to also usually be feminists, will fight to the bitter end to defend this power, creating elaborate fairy tales about how women supposedly basically never lie. We all know by now that a woman can say that a man raped her if she wants to be particularly heinous, and we all know that false rape allegations have been on the rise in recent history, coinciding with the rise of fourth wave feminism. But even more so, women can say that a man threatened her, and it can be entirely a fabrication, but the masses will almost automatically side with the woman. Anita Sarkeesian made hundreds of thousands of dollars exaggerating or maybe even completely fabricating supposed threats, and if you try to merely tell people about this, they'll think you are a misogynist, even if you are a gay man or a woman. Seriously, try it for yourself. Please do research and inform people about Anita Sarkeesian's lies. That said, if a man is accused of threatening a woman, what options does he have? Ask Gregory Allen Elliott what happened when Stephanie Guthrie lied about him in Toronto. Fortunately, over the past few years, the internet has revealed that feminists lie about being threatened all the time. But in real life situations, if a female ex-roommate of a man says that she is afraid to come get her stuff because supposedly he had threatened her, what can he do? If a man were making up lies about another man in such a way, he could tell him to stop lying about him or he really is gonna kick his ass. And if he ended up fighting the dude, a lot of people wouldn't feel sorry for the guy who was lying about him. However, if a woman fakes distress and the man gets upset with her and even simply yells at her that she is a liar in front of somebody, or he posts about it publicly, it will appear that the man really was in the wrong the whole time. The woman's lie of fake distress can therefore justify itself if she merely manages to piss the guy off. And again, almost every woman is aware of her power over men in that way. Those who exploit it and those who knowingly enable other women to get away with lying are exhibiting toxic femininity. The third form of toxic femininity is blatant conflict instigation between men. When I thought of this one, I was thinking of the type of thing that you can find in videos where a woman is trying to throw punches or slap a guy because other guys are around, hoping that somehow her boyfriend will end up fighting the guy. A man obviously cannot get away with physically assaulting another man without getting punched, so this is toxic femininity and we've all seen it. I'll move on. The fourth form of toxic femininity is being a tattletale. Again, you've all seen this, and it isn't entirely confined to women and girls, but it tends to be more common in females, and we all know it. When young boys tattle on other boys after they do something to them, they are often told to be a man and not to tattle, but little girls can sometimes become teachers' pets by telling on boys. I remember this very clearly from being a little boy. You see, females that exhibit toxic femininity are generally authoritarians because their powers over others only work if people are compliant to the various forms of manipulation that they exhibit. Men can do crappy aggressive type of things all by themselves and be considered toxically masculine, but the things specific to women and girls almost unanimously depend on others catering to their wishes. And I think that the behavior is learned from girls by being tattletales in most instances. Not only can girls seek vengeance on people by getting them in trouble, but they can often be praised for it by the authority figure that they tattle to. So don't ever encourage this behavior in young girls, and certainly not in women. The fifth form of toxic femininity is manipulation of people that are close to them to make their lives the way they want it to be. Again, this is something that men do too, but I think women do it a lot more. I find that this one usually ends up coming around to bite the female in the ass because they tend to get caught. But females can tell people things about each other that they didn't necessarily need to know in order to divide and conquer. Again, it's a dumb idea, but people do dumb things. Also, a lot of feminists especially get really into this thing called gaslighting, which is the art of dishonestly talking about conflicts that happened in the past and telling the other person it was their fault, trying to revise history and make them believe that they were at fault when they probably weren't. Feminists these days start conflicts all the time, especially on the internet, and then say it was the other person's fault, and then to add insult to injury, when you tell the truth about what happened, they will commonly accuse you of gaslighting, because they all know the term thanks to Everyday Feminism's article about it. Form number 6 of toxic femininity is something that women don't necessarily do maliciously, but still very often has damaging effects, which is wanting to control men and thinking that they know what's best for men and how men should best be men. Basically, Every feminist does this when they talk about how the patriarchy hurts men too, and stuff like that, and then they proceed to try to tell men how to behave, like as if females wrote the rule book on how men should behave. Now, I don't spend a lot of time talking about women as a whole in my videos. I like to talk about feminists, specifically, because I think women are very complicated creatures and I know many different women who act in different ways. However, feminists do not give the same respect to men. Feminists think that they know more about men than men know about themselves. Feminism is basically predicated on this idea, but I don't think this behavior is ultimately just confined to feminists. Truthfully, there's probably plenty of women who nag their husbands, trying to get him to spend less time at work, when really, if he wasn't cashing in on overtime hours, they'd end up homeless. Form number 7 of toxic femininity is gossiping for personal gain. This is different than lying. For example, I have noticed various women worming their way into positions of power in various LGBTQ organizations. For example, based on repeatedly bringing up dirt on their competition that might very well be true, but then it turns out that they are total hypocrites and they end up doing the same thing as the guy might have done, or maybe the last guy in charge did, once they get into power, but when questioned, she'll always cry, "Misogyny!" Men might do this a bit too, but from my experience, not so commonly, and they certainly don't play victim when they get caught being hypocritical. This leads me to my 8th form of toxic femininity, which is playing the victim. You can find all sorts of videos on YouTube of this, and it's super pathetic. It's awesome though that we have phone cameras now so we can catch women in the act of doing this more commonly. The 9th form of toxic femininity is just a lack of loyalty to people, even towards their good friends, based on selfishness. I've noticed in my life that a lot of women will sacrifice solid friendships seemingly over nothing, whereas male friend groups stay together a bit better. What's interesting, though, is that feminists will sometimes refer to the male friend group loyalty as toxic masculinity itself, because supposedly, guys cover for each other when they do bad stuff, and therefore it enables bad pack mentality type behaviors. So, in so many words, men shouldn't be loyal to each other, because that's why gang rapes happen. Calm down, feminists. Loyalty can be good too. The 10th and final form of toxic femininity is something that I almost didn't put on the list, which I have noticed a lot more commonly with women and girls than with males, which is that they pick favorites and it clouds their judgment. I have especially noticed this with female teachers and bosses, though unfortunately I can't elaborate a whole lot on this one because I don't really know entirely why it happens. I just know that from my perception, females totally play favorites and often end up shafting people that they don't like as much. Even though if somehow somebody does something that they don't like, they'll throw them under the bus and pick a new favorite. That's all for tonight. Drop me a comment, help me out on Patreon if you think I seem cool, hit that bell button next to the subscribe button so you don't get unsubscribed, and stay tuned.